Joining me now is Olli Rehn. He is governor of the Bank of Finland, former European Commissioner for Economic Affairs. Joining us now for an exclusive interview, your first since taking this role at the Bank of Finland. Thanks so much for your time. Let me get your response. We've already heard from Jean-Claude Juncker saying that he's confident the U.S. will stick to the agreements they made in Washington, but that the EU will retaliate if the U.S. puts more tariffs on cars. What do you think about this growing trade war? How does that affect the European economy?
It is very regrettable that from the U.S. side there is a tendency to escalate the trade war, especially with China, but also with Europe. And I don't find it very serious to compare Chinese and European trade policies. The European Union is fundamentally committed to the liberal international order, both in security and trade. And I would very much welcome that the United States leadership would do the same.
What is your view on the World Trade Organization? It has been criticized by both Americans and Europeans as far as how long it takes, for example, to solve issues that come before it. But would it be a big problem if the U.S. left the World Trade Organization?
Certainly it would damage liberal international order and the foundations of world trade, free and fair trade. The World Trade Organization is not perfect by no means, but on the other hand it is essential in facilitating multilateral trade and thus it is even with its weaknesses the basis of free and fair trade. We want to reform the WTO and we have been very active in engaging in negotiations on that both with China and the United States from the side of the European Union.
What do you think about Donald Trump's claims that China manipulates its currency? He's made similar claims about the EU, about Germany. Do you see currency manipulation when you look out over the major economies? Do you see anyone manipulating their currency?
The European Central Bank certainly is not manipulating the euro. Our starting point, our basis of taking decisions is based on the economic outlook of Europe, both growth, employment and of course achieving our price stability target. We don't usually comment on other central banks, other currencies, but my reading of the Chinese situation is that in fact the Chinese yuan renminbi has been weakened mainly because of the threat of escalation of trade war, not because of any manipulation from the central bank. Right, actually, rather to the contrary.
Do you expect the trade war to cause risks to the European economic outlook as well?
We don't see yet direct impacts, and they are fortunately so far rather limited. On the other hand, we have seen some confidence impact. On the other hand, which is potentially damaging for growth and employment. On the other hand, the ceasefire between the EU and the US achieved by President Juncker and Trump in late July has somewhat eased these concerns, but more recently there has been new concerns, and I very much seriously wish that this unnecessary rhetoric would cease and we would not try to escalate the trade wars, because that would damage the whole world economy, both US workers and European workers.
What do you think about the possibility of going the other direction? Cecilia Malmström recently suggested in front of Parliament that not only could the EU do away with tariffs on cars, but all tariffs could be brought down to zero if the U.S. Would respond in kind. How would that affect the European and the global economy?
To my mind, the initiative of Commissioner Cecilia Malmström was a very commendable one and a very important one. It shows that the European Union is in favor of free and fair trade, and it would give a level playing field for both US and European car manufacturers, and let the customers decide then. They decide, and let's believe in the market economy. Who produces the best cars, most competitive, best quality cars, they will succeed. That is to the benefit of consumers and businesses, and that's actually the foundation of the wealth of nations and of market economy.
I don't want to finish our interview without getting to ECB policy. I'd love to hear your thoughts on, first of all, what Mario Draghi, what the ECB meant when it said it would keep interest rates at this level through the end of the summer. There's been some debate about what that means. Is this a promise not to raise rates until September?
It is an anticipation on the basis of the decision and forward guidance by the European Central Bank and its governing council. In fact, to my mind, the markets are reading the forward guidance of the European Central Bank correctly for the moment. In other words, even if the net asset purchases will be ended by the end of this year, at the same time the principal payments will continue to be reinvested, and the monetary policy stance will stay expansionary. At the same time, it was anticipated that the policy rates, the interest rates by the ECB will stay at their present levels through the summer of 2019, as you said, and this has been, to my mind, rightly and correctly interpreted by the markets, and I hope also by the citizens, households and businesses. The
market also expects reinvestment to continue for another 2 to 3 years after the finish of net purchases. Does that seem to be a correct assessment as well?
I wouldn't take any stand on the exact timing, but the ECB Governing Council has stated that it anticipates that the principal payments on maturing securities will be reinvested in the coming period as long as deemed necessary, and I assume that we will at some point take decisions on this. As I said, for now and in the near future, the monetary policy stance will stay expansionary, and we aim at achieving our price stability target over the medium term with these policies.
I have to ask you also about a personnel issue. Mario Draghi's term is due to come to an end, and your name has appeared on a number of short lists as the possible replacement. Would you accept the nomination of President of the ECB if you were given it?
Mario Draghi, his term is still going to continue for over a year, for 14 months. So it is quite early to discuss this. Having said that, I find it important to discuss the key challenges of the ECB during the next 8 years of the future ECB President's term. And I think it's quite important that we discuss this, and the next President of the ECB, she or he, will have to be able to steer skillfully the lengthy gradual process of monetary policy normalization, so that growth and employment will not be choked while watching out financial stability risks, and also to contribute to the European public debate on reforming the Eurozone and building bridges in order to help strengthen the foundation of the euro. That calls for quite strong economic and policy making skills, calls for bridge building capacity and competency in communication.
Maybe someone who has all of your experience and skills. Do you think you would be able to do the job?
Let's not jump the gun. I assume that every governor of a euro area central bank would be honored to serve as president of the European Central Bank. if asked and appointed, if duty calls.
All right. Thank you very much, Governor, for your time. Really appreciate it this morning. Olli Rehn, Governor of the Bank of Finland, joining us here at the Bank of Finland in Helsinki.